Hello, everyone. Just waiting for everyone to come into the room. Sorry about the delay. We are joined by Humza, as you can see. I'm just waiting for everyone to join us. Sorry, Humza, also for my delay.
That's okay.
And
I'm not sure why I'm coming up as Amy Fraser, so I'll just rename that.
Great. We've gone live, and so we're just waiting for everyone to come in. As you can imagine, we've got huge sign up for this event, so I'm really excited to be able to
Great.
introduce Hamza in a little while. I'm just waiting for everyone to come into the room. I don't want them to miss anything, so while we're waiting for them to come in, I'm just going to remind everyone that this is a Britain-Palestine project event. We have webinars on average about twice a month, which we then put up on our YouTube and our social media and our podcast platform so that people can listen to the recordings and so forth afterwards. So if you are watching this or listening to this um, and you think there's someone that might be interested in hearing it after the fact, then please do share it far and wide. We will be having Hamza do a little talk, and then there will be Q&A afterwards, which you can post your questions in the chat box, and I will relay them to Hamza. So please do feel free to pop any questions in there. We always have far more questions than we have time for, so I will get through as many as possible. And just as a reminder, Hamza won't be necessarily looking at the chat box as he will be focusing on answering questions, but I will, of course, share the chat box with him after the fact so that he will be able to see any comments that you might have had or questions that I didn't have time for. So Britain-Palestine Project, we are here standing for peace with justice and equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians. For those of you on our mailing list, you would know that we also have another webinar in a few days on the 4th or 5th, let me just check that, but it is Policy Working Group Talk, which is an Israeli group for peace. They had a delegation come over to the UK where they met with a bunch of parliamentarians, organizations, and so forth. We were really, really lucky to sort of host them with that and help them with their schedule. And we are going to have the amazing Susie Betcher from the group come along and talk to us about the group, about their trip, the outcomes of the trip. It's Tuesday, 25th of November. So I will pop a link in the chat box with the information for registering for that as well. Right, so I am going to hand over in a minute to Humza, but first I'm going to introduce him. He doesn't need an introduction, but I will do it anyways. He very kindly spent a lot of time with us as an organization. A bunch of us went up to the Beyond Borders Festival in August in Scotland. And some of you might have watched the talk that he did with our new patron, William Dalrymple, and my father, Afif Safieh, retired diplomat, called Palestine Matters. They had a panel at Beyond Borders. That's links of that on our website and so forth. I'll pop a link in the chat box as well. But Hamza also very kindly did a talk with us, a podcast episode on recognition. And if you remember, Hamza, that was just before the UK recognized the State of Palestine. And so we thought it would be absolutely amazing to have Hamza back to talk about where to go forward from that. And so Hamza is a Scottish politician. He is the First Minister of Scotland and the leader of the SNP, the Scottish National Party, and youngest person to hold the role, younger than me, which made me have a little bit of a midlife crisis and question what I had done with my life, because you have had such a phenomenal career. You are still an MP in the Glasgow region. You've been very vocal and active on this issue of Palestine, partly because you see it as an important issue to get involved in, and also because you have personal ties, your wife being from Palestine as well. So I'm going to hand over to you, Hamza, with a bit of an open question as to where we should go as the UK next, and what your thoughts are on this recognition.
That's one heck of an opening question. Listen, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so delighted to be here. As you might already be able to tell, I'm a little bit hoarse for two reasons. One is it is the season, and I think everybody is coming down with something. And I have three children who've, I think, one by one, managed to pass on whatever they've had on to me. The second reason is a more joyous reason, is that I'm afraid I can't be doing any meeting today without mentioning the fact that Scotland have qualified for the World Cup for the first time in 27 years. And while watching that match, I may have screamed, shouted rather loudly on a number of occasions, and thereby not helping my throat. So forgive me if I sound a little hoarse. But those are the reasons, and therefore I'll try to keep my remarks to a relative minimum. Let's have a really good, open, honest, and even challenging conversations. We all believe in uh, peace, we believe in justice, we believe security, and importantly, we believe in equal rights. But I suspect that there will always be some nuances and differences about how we get there in the end. And I'm always up for being challenged on those and hopefully challenging back where I can. I'm very grateful to British Palestine Project, very grateful to Dee. I had the great pleasure of meeting her and her wonderful father, Afif Safieh, at the Beyond Borders book festival, which is a wonderful international festival, bringing people from across the world, talking about actually these issues about peace, about justice, about how we coexist. And actually, at that event, at that panel, about Afif was superb. Um, it was a very important reminder, actually, of Britain's role in creating the problems that we see in the Middle East, and particularly within Palestine and indeed within Israel. And because we were only miles away from the estate of Arthur Balfour, not that I need to educate anybody here on this webinar, the role, significant role that Arthur Balfour, and damaging role Arthur Balfour played in terms of his declaration. It also, I have to say, following on from that, and I don't call that a silver lining because I can't see any silver lining in a genocide that's taken place. But if there's one thing I've noticed in the last 2 years, more and more people have been talking to me about things like the Balfour Declaration or indeed the British Mandate more than for my entire life. And I've been advocating for justice for the Palestinian people and equal rights for the Palestinian people for my whole life. Taking on demonstrations as a young child by my parents and right the way throughout my childhood, fighting against that injustice that we've seen for all of our lives, and that has taken place since the Nakba, and actually I could argue even before the Nakba as well. I wanted to start from a really personal place, if I may. Again, Dee had mentioned, as well as my advocacy for a long time, that I have personal connections. And those personal connections are through my wife, Nadia, who may be known to some of you. Nadia is of Scottish Palestinian heritage. Her father, born in Gaza. Her mother, white Scottish, Dundonian. Just last week, and this is gratuitous, sorry, just this week, it's very gratuitous of me, but it's a proud husband moment. My wife was made actually the Deputy Lord Provost of Dundee, and the first Muslim woman, first woman of colour to hold that position, but the first, obviously, person of Palestinian heritage in Scotland actually to ever be Deputy Lord Provost. And why it's so special for Dundee is that Dundee is twinned with Nablus and has been for many, many, many years. And so why do I want to start from the personal point of view? Sadly, a month ago, my wife lost her gran, her Jidda Hasna, who I had the pleasure of meeting on several occasions, but she passed away aged 95, and she passed away in Istanbul. Jidda Hasna was around 16 when the Nakba took place, and she was told at that age to leave her house for around about 2 weeks. They said, just come back in a fortnight and the fighting will die down and everything will be fine. Of course, she never returned. She lived in a small town called Julis, which was not far from what is now called Ashkelon, Al-Majdal, as it was then. Julis has quite literally been wiped off the map, eradicated. You can't find it on a map. You'd have to go back to pre-1948 maps, and I've seen those maps to find Julis, but you can't find it on the modern day map. It has quite literally been erased. And she was made a refugee and then moved to Gaza, first Gaza City, and then where they settled in Deir Bala in the Gaza Strip, kind of central Gaza Strip. And they lived there since the Nakba all the way up until early 2024, where we managed as a family to get her and some of Nadia's family out of Gaza. Not all of them, but we managed to get a number of them out, and we got them to Istanbul, and that's where they settled in. gratitude to the Turkish government for granting them refuge and sanctuary at a time when the UK government, of course, wasn't doing that and still isn't doing that in any great way. Jidda Hasna died a month ago, and what made it really more painful, and why I tell the story, is that, of course, her passing in itself was painful because she was like the matriarch of the Al Nakla clan. But perhaps more so than that is that she didn't get to die at home. And this is, and her story is the perfect demonstration of the systematic degradation, humiliation, attempt to strip rights that the Israelis have been engaged in, and the Israeli regimes of decades have been engaged in since 1948, to take away the right of somebody to die in their home, for her to be buried next to her husband. Not possible. In fact, her husband, my wife's Sido Abdul Hamid, his graveyard, in fact, has been bombed. The cemetery that he was laid to rest. So even in death, they cannot rest. They do not have peace. And every time there is a genocide, you can talk about the Holocaust, Rwanda, Bosnia, and of course Gaza, or even frankly what we're seeing in Sudan, which we can't forget about and must keep continuing to raise the issue around. In the aftermath of these terrible events, horrendous genocides, people always ask the same question. They always ask, well, how could human beings be so cruel to one another? And the answer is always the same, invariably, always the same. It starts with dehumanization. And that is the only way by which one can justify mentally, and even then, I'm not sure how it's done, but one can mentally justify things like peppering Hind Rajab's car with 335 bullets, or killing in an airstrike 4-day-old twins, Asar and Asil, as their father was registering their births, actually. It's the only way you can justify the mass slaughter of children, innocent men, women, which the Israelis and the soldiers in the IOF have been doing now for over 2 years. And so what's our job and what's Britain's role to go back to Dee's question and circle back round to it? Well, first of all, our role is to keep speaking out. When the news of the ceasefire was announced, and again, inevitably, Gaza was going to begin to disappear from the news bulletins, which it has done, despite the fact that ceasefire has been violated with almost 300 people killed. In fact, a terrible strike. Just yesterday, with multiple children once again killed. As Rafat al-Harir, the famous Palestinian poet, Gazan poet, said often, when they talk about ceasefire, they talk about Palestinians having to cease and Israelis firing, or something to that effect. So, we are seeing violations of that ceasefire, but nobody talking about it. So we must keep speaking out. We must also keep speaking out, and this again goes to Dee's question, because the situation is not resolved. We do not have an equal Palestinian state with equal rights for the people of Palestine. And those, of course, that live in Israel, those Arabs that live in Israel, do not enjoy equal rights either, as we know from the judgment of the ICJ in 2024, June 24, that Israel, when it comes to its policies, is in breach of its obligations under the Apartheid Convention and prevention of racial segregation. So we know that Israel is already in breach of those important conventions. So we must keep speaking out. We must keep pressuring the UK government. It was simply not enough to stand up at UNGA, the UN General Assembly, and declare your recognition of the Palestinian state. Well, what are you doing, given you have a historic responsibility to make sure that there's a functioning Palestinian state? And of course, working with regional partners, that has to be done, but making sure there's a functional and viable Palestinian governance and government arrangement. And frankly, I don't think the current government nor their governance structures are fit for purpose in any way, shape, or form, neither the individuals nor the institutions. And that's not entirely to blame on the individuals that are there, because again, there's been systematic attempts to destabilize and make sure that those institutions are not viable by the Israelis over 7 decades. So we have to keep doing that. The greatest tool that we have, or power or leverage that we have, as we talk as kind of citizens, is of course at the ballot box. There are three elections coming up next year in the United Kingdom: the Scottish, the Welsh, and local elections. And it's really for organisations like the British Palestine Project and many others to begin to educate people to make this a central issue. One of the central issues, there'll be lots of issues: education, health, transport, local council funding, all these things that are important. But we have to make sure that this issue, the issue of UK and governments, Labour governments' complicity within a genocide in Gaza, is not forgotten. And that, frankly, the leverage we have is to punish those who defended it and were complicit in it. And they should be punished, absolutely punished at the ballot box for that. And I don't care what party you belong to. If you defended it, then you absolutely deserve at the ballot box to be punished for it. Because how you can possibly live with yourself, understanding and knowing that you've been complicit in supporting and even arming a genocide, is beyond me. So there's a power of work I would suggest to do between now and May 26, which is when those elections will take place. I'll be certainly being involved in those efforts. I'm not standing again for re-election, but I'll use my experience over the last 15 odd years in frontline politics to begin to make sure that this issue, amongst other issues, is quite prominent. So, with that, DS, very short summary of what I think we can do and what the UK, I think, needs to do. But I'm more than happy now to just leave as much time as possible for some Q&A.
Thanks, Humza, and thank you so much for joining us, even though you're not feeling well. Although congratulations to Scotland and also to Nadia. So it's been a good week. We've got a few questions coming in through the chat box, but I am going to start with my own as my prerogative of having control of the Zoom. I wondered what you thought the first concrete next step would be for the UK government in terms of what next after recognition.
Well, let's just talk about concrete steps. So there's three immediate concrete steps that they should be taking. One is they should stop all arms sales to Israel. Full stop. There's no ifs, buts, maybes. We are dealing with a government in Israel that is led by a man who's wanted by the highest criminal court in the world for war crimes and crimes against humanity, which include using starvation as a weapon of war. There can just be no justification. Any type of mental gymnastics to suggest that these are defensive weapons or components that are used for civilian use. Look, the Israeli state is led by a man wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes. In addition, the Israeli state, not one individual, the Israeli state has been condemned by the ICJ for not living by or living up to its obligations, in fact, being in breach of its obligations to prevent apartheid and racial segregation. That is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a government that you should be selling a single weapon to, or component, or munitions to, not one bullet to. So that's an immediate concrete step. The second one is sanctions. And I don't mean sanctions on one or two individuals like Ben Gvir or Smotrich, who are, of course, frankly, extremists of the highest order. I mean meaningful sanctions that are going to hit Israel hard. The UK is Israel's fifth largest trading partner. It could do some significant economic harm, which is the point of sanctions, frankly, to use them as a pressure point economically to Israel, and it should do that. And it should join the calls, as I have been making for many months now, to treat Israel the way that apartheid South Africa was treated. So, boycotting them from sporting competitions, cultural competitions at Eurovision. And the BBC should grow a bit of a backbone and join the likes of RTE and others, broadcasters who said they won't participate in Eurovision if Israel allowed to continue. And the third thing, so we've got weapons, suspend all arms sales to Israel. You've got sanctions, and the third one is related to sanctions. Actually, it's if you're not going to do sanctions, at the very least, you should suspend the current trade agreement that we've got with Israel. People forget, although there was negotiations about a new one, there's a current trade deal with Israel, a current trade agreement, sorry, with Israel that allows Israel to have favorable trading terms, tariff-free or reduced tariff access to the United Kingdom. You should stop that immediately. So those are three immediate steps. If we're talking about the Palestinian state, then I would say that look, I support the plan. It's often called the Arab Plan around having technocrats kind of in charge of Gaza for a period. And I think what the British should do is they should say unequivocally that the future of Gaza and Palestine should be decided by Palestinians and Gazans, not by a board of peace that has astonishingly the likes of Tony Blair, a man who is responsible for deaths of Arabs and many others, including British servicemen and women, because of an illegal war that took place in Iraq. So if the British were serious about nation building, then they should back the plans to have Palestinians in charge of running their own affairs. And yes, technocrats, I have no trust in either Fatah nor Hamas to lead Gaza or Palestine more generally. I think the idea of bringing in Palestinian technocrats, and Palestine has some incredibly smart, clever people, educated academics, economists, bringing those people on board to lead a government. But they should decide who those people are, not decided by some board that's imposed from Western powers.
Yes, when I first read Tony Blair, I did think that I must have woken up in a satire yet again. It was a bizarre choice, to say the least. So you touched on this. Uh, should the UK be publicly committing to support the ICJ and the ICC processes? Because they've been a bit weak when it's come to that, haven't they?
Yes, is the short answer. I mean, I'll just give a 1 minute longer answer, but I don't think I have to elaborate too much. Look, either you believe in the global rules-based order for everybody or you don't believe in the global rule-based order. And if you don't believe in the global rules-based order, just say that, and then we can just let anarchy reign. And by the way, humanity won't survive too long. Because what you do is if you don't apply international law equally, two things happen. One, of course, it's not worth the paper it's written on. But secondly, all that does is incentivize war. So one of the disincentives for war is that there should be accountability. So I think, if you're a warlord wanting to take over your neighboring territory and get the minerals and get the wealth, take over and expand your empire, and there's no such thing as international law to hold you to account, and my army's bigger than yours, then why not? Now, what have I got to lose? Maybe a few thousand soldiers, but what do I care? I've got a palace. I've got my own bodyguards, plenty of soldiers, no problem. If I'm not going to be held to account. So that's what the degradation and frankly decapitation of international law does. And if it's meaningless and worthless, which is it's starting to look like, and I say that with great sadness, I'm somebody who believes in international law, believes in the global rules-based order, that if that is the case, then we are really going to see anarchy. If it's not already reigning free and running wild, then anarchy will be the order of the day. And I'm afraid that is deeply, deeply worrying.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this before as well, but for example, as a British Palestinian, as same as your wife, it puts you in an incredibly difficult and heartbreaking situation when you have your one country being complicit in something so horrendous in your other country, but then having to watch parliamentarians debate whether international humanitarian law should be applied to your people is another thing that's incredibly disheartening, because as you
Yeah.
say, it's either for everyone or it's for no one. uh,
Mm.
and sort of touching on that as well, we've had this new resolution come out, 2803.
Mm.
It leaves out a lot of things. The illegality of the Israeli settlements, the 1967
Yeah.
borders as a baseline, Palestine's legal status as a state, um, and it makes no reference to things such as war crimes, crimes against humanity,
Mm-mm.
starvation as a method of warfare, genocide, all these things that I thought we'd um, got on board with understanding that this is what's happening. So we've got a question from Ian Scobie as well. Is there not a contradiction between the UK's recognition of Palestine as a state and its support for the recent Security Council resolution, which calls for Palestinian self-determination and only envisages a two-state solution?
Yeah, so look, I'm not going to try to speak on behalf of the UK government because it's not my job, and I'm somebody who, frankly, doesn't understand the contradictions and hypocrisies in their positions very regularly on many foreign affairs, by the way, but also, of course, in the case of Palestine. Um, by the way, I should also say from the offset, I'm somebody who believes in the two-state solution. That's not what everybody does. Some people believe in the idea of one state, equal rights for all under one, and that's a reasonable position to advocate, but it's not the one I advocate. I advocate for a two-state solution. You can argue with that and come back to me on that. It's not a problem. I'm happy to debate that. But I, for one, do not understand the real contradiction, Ian, for me, is that on the one hand, the UK government says that they believe in recognition of a two-state solution, so recognition of the Palestinian state, and on the other, they absolutely are supplying the weapons, including components for F-35 jets, components that are single-handedly destroying and annihilating the Palestinian people in Gaza, and also selling arms that I have no doubt are involved in some of the atrocities we're seeing in the West Bank, which, by the way, we can't stop talking about the West Bank. It's always difficult because I know there's so much attention, rightly so, on Gaza, but what's happening in the West Bank and the continued theft of land and Israeli violence, settler violence, is completely out of control. So there is absolute hypocrisy in the UK position. There's no doubt about it. There, of course, is hypocrisy. There always has been, and in some regards in foreign affairs, there often is hypocrisy and contradictions. Um, the Trump plan, as it's been called, kind of Gaza ceasefire plan, at the very least, has seen some element of reduction of the killing. It's not stopped. 300 people have been killed, murdered, slaughtered since then by Israel, and many children. So it's not completely stopped by any stretch of the imagination. But we've seen some reduction and we've seen some more aid come in. But there's no way that that plan, as it's being termed, is in any way, shape, or form going to realize and deal with the root problem and realize the vision of a Palestinian state. It talks about a viable pathway mañana, sometime in the future, but it doesn't realistically. It's not going to address that problem, and certainly not going to realize a Palestinian state anytime soon, which is where we need other state actors and those with a degree of influence. And some might point to MBS's visit to the US, people, states like Qatar, and others. They're going to have to really flex whatever influence they've got to ensure that this moment, this inflection point, results in not just a viable pathway, but the actual foundations, formulations of a Palestinian state moving forward.
Thanks for that. I've got a lovely comment from Emily Swain who says that you would be the perfect fit for one of these technocrats. And would you
Except
go?
I'm not Palestinian. That was honestly, I'm not. I would. It's a lovely comment, but I just interject to say, I'm not that I'm being offered it or would ever be offered it. I suspect, but even if I was, I would wholesale reject. I mean, I'm always happy to advise, but honestly, there are so many clever, sensible, experienced, intelligent Palestinians. By the way, your father included. But there's many I've met over the years who should be determining their own future. It's not for a bunch of West, and I'm a Westerner. I have Eastern roots, but it's not for a bunch of Westerners to go over and tell countries how to lead. So yeah, a very nice comment, but let's make sure Palestinians are the ones who are taking forward their own future.
And speaking of Papa Safieh, he is watching today, so he will appreciate all of the compliments you've been giving him today for sure. Um, so I wanted to ask you a bit about British public opinion because definitely in the last
Yeah.
2 years it's moved. There's been a shift. I don't like using the terms pro-Palestinian because it implies being anti-something. I don't know, it shouldn't, but it kind of does. But, definitely more people learning and being much more supportive about the Palestinian issue and so forth. And it just seems like parliamentarians across the UK are still so far behind public opinion on this issue. Why do you think the political leadership is lagging so far behind? And what can we do to kind of get them on the same page as the rest of us?
Yeah, yeah. Look, first, let me absolutely agree with you that public opinion globally is shifting. So there's a few details to that premise. First of all, excuse me, that I've never seen an issue like this, that week after week, month after month, so many people in global capitals and cities across the world come out in such numbers. To this day, I mean, if there's a protest called in London, we'll see hundreds of thousands of people take to the street. And you can see the same in Madrid, you can see the same in Berlin, you can see the same in Paris, and of course, right across the world, Rio, right the way through to United States and across the world. So people have been moved in a way that they haven't been moved on any other issue in my lifetime. Even though there's been protests in Iraq war, they simmered down after a period. For 2 years, just week after week, as I say, at least month after month, there is a level of anger what people are continuing to see. Further evidence for that. United States. I've just come back actually from a tour in the United States, speaking on a number of these
I
issues,
saw you got an
including Gaza.
award. Do you
Ah,
want to
yeah, it
tell
was very
everyone
kind. Yeah,
about
yeah.
your award,
Yeah.
please?
No. It was Voices of Conscience Award. So it's actually sitting behind me actually, but it was for speaking out about Gaza, which was very kind of the organisers. But the person that was there who got the award also got an award, who's far braver than me, is a retired Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar, and he is one of the ones who spoke out and was a whistleblower for when the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which of course is a misnomer, if ever we heard one, he's the one who blew the whistle on the fact that they were designed just to kill Palestinians. So it was much more humbling to be in his presence than I think for him to be in mine. But I was in the United States and in the US, a poll has come out showing that 6 out of 10 Americans who are under the age of 35 now hold pro-Palestinian views, which is astonishing in the United States. In the United States, that's unbelievable. Zohran Mamdani, I was there just the day after he got elected, and I'm delighted to see his election and as mayor of New York, or mayor-elect, as he is just now. And what's fascinating about his election is that he's very pro-Palestinian. He calls a spade a spade. He calls it a genocide. He's talked about arresting um, Netanyahu if he ever steps foot in New York, and he'd try to do everything he could in his powers to do that. And yet he got elected. He got elected um, in a state, or a city that has the highest number of Jewish people outside of Tel Aviv, largest number of Jewish people outside of Tel Aviv. I think. Happy to be corrected if that's wrong, but it's there or thereabouts. And that is a reminder to us that many people, regardless of faith, and there'll be some on this call, I'm sure, Jewish people that support the cause of equality, justice, and in the United States, in New York, in fact, we saw Jewish people very early on, post October the 7th, occupy Grand Central Station, calling for a ceasefire. So public opinion has definitely shifted. To answer your question directly, why is the politics and politicians so disconnected from that public support? That's actually our fault. We're not doing enough collectively, and this is the challenge, to make this an issue. To say to people, yes, there's other issues. Of course, there is the cost of living crisis, your energy bills going up, your mortgage going up, the fact that you've got concerns maybe about education or health or transport. These are all legitimate issues. But you have to realize that the government that's presiding over us has been completely complicit in a genocide, and we can't let them forget that. So I think it's really important to make that an issue. Now, that's why I mentioned next May, Scotland, Wales, local elections in England. There is an opportunity at the ballot box to send a very clear message, and we've got to be organised and mobilised to do that.
Yeah, exactly that. And we've got a question from Imti, which follows on from that. Which political parties in the UK are in favor of stopping all arms sales to Israel?
It's a good question. So I'll go by my knowledge, and happy to be corrected. But the Green Party support that, Liberal Democrats support that, the SNP, I should say, support that. Um, they, I think, are the only three that support halting all arms sales to Israel. I think Labour, of course, are complicit. Conservatives support. Though, by the way, Labour have sold higher value of arms. Plaid Company, sorry, yes, somebody said, I just saw that in the chat. Plaid Company in Wales. How can I forget? Thank you for that. Yeah, Plaid have been fantastic on this issue. There may be others, by the way, local elections and slightly smaller parties that I don't know, and forgive me. I should say actually Northern Ireland, which also I think has elections next year. Do they? No, no, I don't think they do actually. I'll double check that in a minute. But Sinn Féin, for example, have been fantastic on the issue as well. And the current First Minister, Northern Ireland, Michelle O'Neill, is great on the issue. The Labour Party complicit, Conservative complicit, Labour in 3 months, the last 3 months of last year actually, they sold a higher value of arms to Israel than the Conservatives did in the previous 3 years, 4 years actually. So incredible what Labour has done, and then Reform, of course, are completely and absolutely behind the Israeli government. So I think for me, it's about the parties, but also the individuals, especially at local elections. There will be some individuals who will absolutely be unequivocal in demanding justice on this issue, and there'll be some that will waver, and then there will somebody that will be supportive completely of the Israeli government's position. And I think at a local election, you've got a real opportunity to be able to sway which way things go, and we should be strategic. We can't target every single seat perhaps in the country, but what seats do we think we can target? Where will our efforts make a difference? And we will be able to frankly give the UK government, Labour Party in particular, a bloody nose, politically speaking, for supporting and being complicit in a genocide.
So, for those that don't have an election coming up, and for those that have MPs that are kind of on the fence or a bit wavery, a bit weak-willed on the issue, what do you advise that citizens do? For example, I've got a question from Bruce who says, I'm a member of the Labour Party and campaigned for my MP who is Jewish and who says things like, I have no time for the Netanyahu government, but I can't support BDS or an arms embargo. How do I persuade them to change their position? So there's the ones in the middle.
Yeah, look, I'm afraid it's not terribly sophisticated, but politicians, and I say this as one, are relatively simple beings. Look, if you can't persuade somebody through the morality, and I think the morality should be enough for most people, you would think so. But if you can't persuade them through the morality of the issue, I'm afraid then you've got to just begin to get organised and mobilised. I'm afraid there's no other language that sometimes politicians understand other than the ballot box. And so, if this MP, whoever it may be, is not willing to support an arms embargo, and you should do everything you can to do that, you should make the persuasive argument. You should go see them at the surgeries. You should make sure that hundreds, if not thousands, of constituents are writing to them on the issue, demanding it, putting pressure, all in, of course, within the parameters of the law. That goes without saying. If that isn't working, then you've got to begin to say, well, who is the candidate that's going to take on whoever this MP is. We've got a few years until the next election. Goodness knows actually if that's actually going to be the case. But the next elections in the UK aren't scheduled until 29. That actually is a bit of can be a bit of a gift. Well, how do you mobilise and how do you ensure that you've got a candidate that can stand against that person, or actually within the Labour Party, if it's a safe Labour seat, well, how can we ensure that that person is getting challenged by somebody within the Labour structure that is going to support the aims that we have around equality and justice and peace, and that's it. It's not some kind of secret plot or plan or ploy that we've got. It's very simply wanting equality, and that's not an unreasonable ask. So look, there's no quick fix. There's no switch. I'm afraid to tell you. I don't know that's disappointing, but there's nothing that I can give you in terms of particular insight that says, look, you can take this action, and immediately the MP will begin to see the light. I'm afraid that's going to take hard graft. It's going to take mobilization, and it's going to take what I think is probably the hardest part of all, which is organization. Particularly when Gaza does, as it is now, beginning to peter out of the news headlines, not so far up the agenda. When that happens in 2029 is a long way away, hence why I'm concentrating on 26 actually. By the way, and there's not Northern Irish elections, they're not due till 27, but certainly in Wales, Scotland, and in England, there will be local elections as well.
Thanks for that. You said earlier about not forgetting about the West Bank. We are hoping in our webinar series to have a couple of webinars in the near future on the topic of the West Bank as well, different kind of oppression, occupation, and so forth going on over there, but shouldn't be forgotten. I've got a question from Mayon. In a better future scenario in the West Bank, how would you handle the issue, and what should the UK government be saying about the illegal settlements and the 700,000 plus settlers? I can't remember the number, some of whom are armed and extremely violent. What should the position of the UK be here?
Yeah, yeah. Do you know it's I'm reading it's a small booklet really more than anything. It's I think it's Lessons of Tyranny from the 20th Century, Timothy Snyder, and he writes within it one of the lessons. I'm going to paraphrase and probably get it wrong because I'm just doing it from memory. But one of the lessons is kind of beware the paramilitary, that a state will often use violence and kind of quote unquote ordinary citizens in that violence in order to maintain control. And that's what we've seen with the settlers, many settlers in Israel. A law unto themselves, armed to the absolute teeth, and can murder with impunity, absolute impunity. I mean, the percentage of settlers that are actually charged for murder is pathetically, pitifully low, and probably getting lower actually over the years. Um, what do we do about it? Look, this is all going to be a negotiated settlement if you believe in a two-state solution, as I do. Clearly, many of us talk about going back to the 67 borders, and therefore that land has to be given back to the Palestinians. It's Palestinian land that by international law has been stolen. There's again no dubiety. I mean, I think it's only the United States and Israel which disagree with the label and term of illegal settlements. They are illegal, and therefore it's really clear that that land has to be returned as back as Palestinian land as per the 67 border agreement. Uh, you know, the difficulty is for most of my life, there's not been a structured negotiation and peace talks that have taken place. So again, Afif could talk to this with much more knowledge and lived experience than I. But you look past kind of Oslo Accords and you look past kind of Camp David, Bill Clinton, and there's not really been much meaningful discussion, and certainly not partners for peace involved. So before we even get into the issues of what happens with things like annexed land, stolen land, what happens with right of return for Palestinians, etc., etc. Once you get these really kind of issues that are totemic, you've got to at least have a pathway towards negotiations, not just kind of back channel. And I'm not sure the back channels really exist much anymore, but they probably do to some extent. You've got to have some sort of process, and you don't have that process at the moment. And I'm afraid I don't think you've got partners for peace at the moment either. Certainly not with the Netanyahu government. And I think that the Palestinian Authority is so weakened, so distrusted by the Palestinian people that I'm not convinced that they would be a viable partner to negotiate with either, to be frank.
On that note, because as you know, we have some of our potential candidates for leadership in Israeli prison and detention and administrative prison as administrative prisoners, hostages, whatever you want to call them. The most well known, obviously, being Marwan Barghouti. Do you think that he should be part of the demands that the UK is putting on Israel, or something that should be sort of vocalized by the UK government a bit more?
Oops, I was muted. Look, I support the call from the elders. I don't know if you've seen the elders. The elders are a group, as the name suggests, of people who were previous statesmen and women, like Mary Robinson and many others. And it started, I think, founded by Nelson Mandela, actually. And they're really a quite committed group towards peace. And I don't agree with the positions of every single one of them all of the time. But the elders were one of the first to commend them to call for the release of Marwan Barghouti. And so I absolutely support that call. I don't know enough about Marwan in terms of his kind of physical capacity and frankly his mental capacity, because there's no doubt that he's been severely mistreated, probably tortured within Israel. The last time we saw him was when Ben Gvir went to go berate him in an Israeli prison, and he looked in frankly quite a terrible condition. So whether he has the physical, the mental capacity to lead, I don't know the answer. I'm not simply questioning it for the sake of questioning it. I just felt very troubled by the images that I saw of him. That seemed to be very clear evidence of mistreatment. I absolutely condemn the ill treatment, by the way, including torture of Marwan Barghouti. But can we also say that that is the norm for many Palestinian political prisoners, Palestinian, frankly, I call them hostages because they are. They're taken often without any charge, held for years. Many of them we know as young as 14 or even younger, actually, in some cases. Those political, those prisoners, hostages, they should also be released. Those that have been held without charge for God knows how many years, or spurious charges. So sorry, in short, yes, I agree with the call to release Marwan Barghouti. Whether he can be part of that infrastructure, I mean, I think he would definitely be welcome, wanted, desired, because he is not Fatah, he's not Hamas. He's very popular within the Palestinian population and diaspora. So if he was, I would certainly have no issue with that. But I think it's going to have to be quite a broad team of people who've got that experience, and again, led by Palestinians.
And I think it's important to note that you can be supportive of the release of someone like Marwan Barghouti without actually endorsing him as the future leader, but just in 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 the hopes of having sort of fair elections for us in the future. It would be nice if our potential candidates were not in an administrative detention. We touched on the settler violence. I just wanted to use it as an opportunity to, for those that are listening, to talk about our Giving Tuesday campaign. We are jumping on the Giving Tuesday um, institution, and I was going to say bandwagon, but that doesn't sound very nice, and we want your support. But we had a friend of the Britain Palestine Project, Aude Haslin, who was an peace advocate in Masafer Yatta. He was murdered by an illegal settler during one of the outbreaks of violence there, and we're bringing over his cousin to the UK to meet with different parliamentarians, organizations, and so forth. We did this with Aude and the mayor of Masafer Yatta a couple of years ago. Actually, I think it's 2024, so only last year. So much has happened since then. So this will be sort of a continuation of that. It'll be carrying on his legacy. And we are using this little project. We're hoping to fundraise for it during the Giving Tuesday campaign. We aim to raise 5,000. So if you are thinking about donating to us in the future, then do think about doing it on Giving Tuesday. You'll see lots of stuff on our socials, emails, etc., etc. But it's for that lovely project of bringing him over to be able to keep the West Bank in the mind of the public over here, come back and tell people here in influential and potentially influential positions about what's happening in the West Bank and Masafer Yatta in particular, and hopefully bring back some positive feelings about the support that they find here when they are here. So keep an eye out for Giving Tuesday. I wanted to ask you one more question before we go, because before your voice gives out on us. You've done so well. Thank you. What do you think the UK could be doing going forward, helping in terms of helping with Palestinian state and institution building? Because we have none of that at the moment, as you know. Um, what kind of where can the input from the UK be? Should there be some? Can they be helpful in that respect?
Look, I think they've got an obligation, given the historic responsibility of the mess that the British have created over the decades. So I think there is a responsibility. The question is, can we see the UK as a good faith actor? And I don't know if we can, given their complicity at the moment in the genocide. But look, we have democracy that is centuries old. We have institutions that are well respected across the world. We can do devolution, although I'm, as you know, a supporter of Scottish independence and will continue to be, and look forward to the day that my country has its own seat at the UN and can advocate positively on foreign issues. There's a good model of devolution that we can look to use as a blueprint for others. There's plenty that we can do and should be doing as part of that nation building, governance, capacity building that the UK should absolutely be involved in. But can I also just say that I think the regional partners have also got a role to play. I know there's different political systems. There's not democracy everywhere. Palestinians want free and fair elections, we know, but that doesn't stop institution building and having regional partners assist. I suppose part of me, and again, I say this as somebody who was born in the West and raised in the West, although I have roots, of course, in the East, that I think the days of kind of Western lecturing, Western kind of models being imposed upon the rest of the world, I think we're really past those days. I don't think they're helpful. Where they can be helpful, as I say, is of course within institutional learning, supporting in a complementary way with the skills, knowledge that they have, the experience that they have. But kind of leading those efforts, I'd love to see it from a far more regional perspective than I would necessarily the Brits or the Americans or Canadians or whoever, the EU leading that effort. I would much rather it was done regionally. I think, it's that old saying that what is about us without us is not for us. And I think that the Palestinian state building should have Palestinians front, center throughout and being supported by the likes of regional partners, and then where British and others can add value, then of course they should seek to do that, but be guided by the Palestinians and by regional partners, not the ones coming in, kicking down the door and saying this is what you've got to do and this is how you do it. And by the way, we'll also sit on your boards and we'll skim some money off the top for consultancy fees, and we'll do things the way we think you should do them. And thanks very much.
Thank you, Humza. Sorry, I did say I was gonna ask one more question, but I've got one final one, if you don't mind, because it's come in from our executive director, Brian Bravati, who you will remember from Beyond Border
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah.
He was wondering, if you're not running in the next elections, what's next for you? And if you're
That's a
not
quick
going to be running
question.
Palestine or Gaza, then
Ah,
what else?
no, no. What question? So I think there's probably a few areas I'm interested in. So I'll seek to do work in three particular areas. One will be in nurturing the next generation of global leadership. I think there's a real problem with global leadership. That's why I think we're in such a mess. I think the lack of values-based leadership worries me, and so we get populists coming up, nation to nation, causing division, strife, and hatred. So I'm working on a project in that regard. Related to that, I'll be using a lot of my efforts to tackle the far right. I'm deeply worried for my kids' safety. I've got three beautiful daughters. Dee got to meet one of them. I think two of them actually were at Beyond Borders. I've got three daughters, and I genuinely don't know if they're going to be safe in the UK moving forward, given that every single opinion poll tells me that Nigel Farage will be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. There's still a long way to go, but I could see the rise. I can see and feel the rise of the right and the rise of the far right. People like Tommy Robinson and his opinions beginning to really get grip of too much society, and therefore the divisions that will cause. So I'll spend a bit of my time seeking to tackle that hatred and trying to cross-party build alliances against it. And then thirdly, which is related to the Gaza point, is I am very interested in that institution building issue and making sure that it's not, as I say, a bunch of Western politicians, frankly, like me, that are leading that effort, but where we can add value, can we add value, but helping those who are from those regions, those countries, in this case, Gaza, how do we help them to rebuild? So if I give you one example, I'm quite focused on trying to rebuild Gaza's higher education sector. I believe higher education is so important. It's, Gaza's going to need judges, lawyers, doctors, nurses, teachers in its rebuild. And you can't do that without higher education institutes, of which Gaza had many. All of them have now been either destroyed or damaged by the genocide and the bombardment. So I'm very keen to build a kind of international coalition. I'm doing some work on this that is hopefully going to help to rebuild Gaza's higher education sector in a way that, again, ensures that there's not a complete brain drain. I think scholarships are important, and I'm very supportive of the scholarships, but I also just don't want every smart, clever, intellectual Gazan to think that the only route out is to leave Gaza. We want to be able to create the institutions to rebuild Gaza and keep some of that talent very much in Gaza and within Palestine to rebuild those institutions. So those are probably three areas, and where I can continue doing work with, of course, the Britain Palestine project. I'm always happy. Just count me as a supporter, count me as a friend.
Well, I think you've got a job because Brian says we would love to work with you.
Okay.
So there you go, pencil us in. And it is so important what you're saying about the institutions. We have a spin-off podcast series called International Law in Crisis with Lara Bird-Leakey, and she recently interviewed the amazing Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Yeah.
She talked about how it's bad enough that all of the hospitals, the universities, and so forth are going to take years to rebuild, but it's not just the physical structures, the infrastructure, is it? It's the professionals to operate these universities, these schools, these, it's going to take a while to train people up, and sadly, there has been a lot of deaths in those professions, and there's been a lot of, as you said, the brain drain. So yeah, it's a long road, but
yeah,
we'll hopefully get there eventually. Humza, I just want to thank you so much because it's always a pleasure speaking to you. It's so heartening to hear such a strong voice, such a strong supportive voice, not just for us, but just in general for international law and humanity and morality and so forth. It's something that is scarily lacking at the moment. So it's really, really nice to be able to have a chat with you again. Everyone in the comments has been thanking you and for your support and for speaking today. I want to thank everyone who came along to listen to us. Thank you so much for joining us again. Please do share this recording once it goes up on the website, either later tonight or maybe tomorrow morning, with anyone that you think will be interested and will benefit from hearing this chat. And Humza, I'm sure we will be hearing a lot of great things about you related to us or not. I know you are going to go on to even more amazing things. And thank you again personally and professionally for all of your support on this issue.
Oh, thank you. Well, listen, thank you, and thank you to all those who joined. And listen, thank you for your moral clarity at a time when we don't have enough moral clarity. Britain Palestine project has been absolutely unequivocal in that. So I look forward to hopefully hosting you at some point in Scotland where I can as well. Perhaps if we can make it in the next 4 months, then I can get you into Parliament, I hope, at some point as well.
I would love that. And yes, we did chat about that, and we will get on that because I think that's super important. Scotland has always been incredibly supportive, and I just love going up there. So yeah.
Great. Well, I'm biased, but I think it's an incredible place. Thank you very much.
Lovely evening, everyone. Humza, thank you so much, and see you all in a couple of days for the Susie Betcher webinar. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.